because I believe it. I believe God is there no matter what we're going through. Today we're going to be talking about scars, and let me tell you a little bit about scars, okay? Scars can be physical scars, they can be emotional scars. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And just because you're a Christian does not mean you cannot suffer from depression, anxiety, or even have thoughts of suicide. Just because you're a Christian doesn't mean you're above all of that. Because all of these things in our lives are physical things happening within our brain. They feel like they're emotional things because it takes us down. But when you have depression or anxiety, or even when you have suicidal thoughts, this is a physical happening within your brain. And let me tell you, there is nothing to be ashamed about. Too many times the church has failed and shamed people who say they are Christians and have these feelings. Well, it's time for that to stop. And it's time for us as a church to step up and help people through these issues. It's time for the church to help and to listen and to talk. Because you listening and talking to one person may save their life today. All these things leave scars in our lives. And each and every one of us has scars. No matter whether you think you do or not, you have scars. And all of these scars tell the stories of our lives, whether they're physical scars, spiritual scars, or emotional scars. Some of the scars we can laugh at. I remember when I was back in Durango, we used to burn wood in our parsonage, okay? We had wood-burning stove, and it was Christmas Eve. And I came home, and the fire had gone out in the house, and it was cold. And so I ran out to the back, and there was some wood, but it wasn't split. So I ran back there, I grabbed my axe, and there was a clothesline there, so I made sure I was far enough away from the clothesline, because an axe and a clothesline, they just don't mix well. And I started to split wood. And little did I know that as I was splitting wood, I was getting closer and closer and closer to the clothesline. Until I saw stars. I swear it was the Bethlehem star right there. And I went back like this, and I realized the axe had hit the clothesline and come back and hit me in the head with the blunt end of the axe. And I stood there for a second, and I went, I bet I'm bleeding. And I put my hand up there, and immediately my whole arm was red. So I went into the house, and I said, help, and I knelt down because I was getting blood all over the place, and my wife sent the kids to help me, thinking I needed to carry in wood. And they walked in, and there was a pool of blood by then on the floor like this, and they screamed, Mom, Mom! And Mom comes in, and she has the audacity to ask, what did you hurt? Okay, I have to tell you why. There was so much blood, and it was dripping. She thought I was holding up my hand, and I had cut my hand. There was so much blood. But I told her it was my head, and she goes, well, that won't hurt anything. She goes, go take a nap. Rub some dirt on it. So they took me to the hospital emergency room, and they had to go in, and they had to cut some of it off, and my wife almost passed out because she saw my skull. My son was there going, wow, I've never seen anything so white in my life. And 25 stitches later, I went home. Now, Scars tell the stories of our lives, and sometimes they're funny stories, amen? This wasn't funny at the time. But we look back and we can laugh. I see all the humor in it. And sometimes we can laugh at our scars because our scars tell funny stories. They remind us of where we've been. But some of our scars aren't easily laughed at. And most of the time, our scars we cannot laugh at. But we can use each and every one of our scars to help others. Sometimes our physical scars tell a story of emotional pain. My daughter Ashley is a beautiful 22-year-old young woman. Life hasn't always been easy for her. She has physical scars that were caused by emotional pain. You see, she suffered from depression and anxiety, and this is not something you ever get over. It is something that you suffer through and you get help with, okay? When she was at her worst, Lisa and I knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what it was. You know, we didn't know she was suffering from depression and anxiety. And we didn't know how far it went. Ashley was sad and she was angry, and she just felt like she wasn't good enough. These are her own words. She didn't know how to handle it, so she started cutting herself over and over and over again. She thought that the pain of cutting herself would take her mind off her sadness, her anger, and her feelings of not being good enough. But it didn't work. Those feelings were still there, and she would, after she would cut herself, she would then feel ashamed and try to hide what she had done. We did seek help from doctors who gave her medication to help with the depression and anxiety, and counselors who gave her tools to use when she was feeling sad and angry and not good enough. But Ashley took it a step further. Ashley designed this cross, and she asked if she could get it on a tattoo. And if you look closely, you can see the scars underneath the tattoo. She wanted the tattoo over those scars to remind her that God is still in control and that God still loved her in the midst of her heartbreak, in the midst of her cutting. God was still there with her, and He still loved her, and He had not abandoned her. And it also reminds her of a promise God gave her. And when I talked to her about using this story, and she gave me permission, she said, that cross reminds me of the promise God gave me. And it's found in Psalm 18:28. My God turns my darkness into light. That's the promise that God gave us and gave her. My God turns my darkness into light. I'm telling you today, she still has anxiety. She was able to go to North Carolina with us, which was unheard of with her anxiety. And when she came back, she had an anxiety attack and missed work. But God was still there with her. And God still loves her. Anxiety is something she'll deal with. Depression is something she'll deal with. But with the help of medication, she is living victoriously over those ailments. Ashley, I love you. And I want to thank you for allowing me to use your story. You know, sometimes physical scars tell the story of a spiritual fight. Jesus fought the greatest spiritual battle of all time. It cost him a torturous beating and death on a cross, where they nailed his hand and his feet to the cross. And those nails left scars for the disciples to see. You remember doubting Thomas? Thomas said he wouldn't believe Jesus was risen from the dead unless he put his finger into those nail holes in his hands and into the scar in his side. And when Jesus did appear before him, Jesus said, "Come on, Thomas, here they are." And he showed him his scars. And that's all he needed to do, was show him his scars. And all Thomas could say is, "My Lord and my God." Even Jesus has scars. Scars that tell the story of his victory over sin, death, and hell. And any emotional problem, any mental health issue that you are going through, he's won victory over it. And his scars tell of his love for you. Whenever you think that you're unloved, think the scars found in Jesus' body. You know, sometimes our scars are not scars that you can see, but they are scars nonetheless. This is my sister. She's the one on the left. I'm the one on the right. She's trying to keep the sun out of my eyes. She loved her little brother. She's 2 years older than me. Never forget that, Shelley. You can laugh. She's 2 years older than me. Shelley was a wonderful sister. This is her today with her husband. She's a beautiful woman. Shelley suffered from depression and suicidal thoughts for most of her life. When we were young, no one knew what she was suffering, and she hid it so well. She had emotional and mental scars that no one could see, but they were still there. She knew what she was suffering from a young age, but she would not share it. Because back then, you didn't share these kind of things. Back then, you hid them. Because if you were a Christian, you couldn't be suffering from these kind of things. The last time she attempted suicide, I was a pastor in Durango, some 1,200 miles away from her. She had taken an overdose of prescription medication. She lied down in her bed. And she waited to die. Her husband, Jim, came home and found her unresponsive in the bed. Called 911. They were able to get her to the hospital and save her life. They had to put her in ICU. Back then, we didn't have cell phones. And there were no phones in ICU rooms. But I called the hospital anyway, and I asked to speak to her. And they said, "We're sorry, we don't have phones in the rooms. And I said, well, I'm Cecil Brown, her brother, and I live 1,200 miles away. And she goes, are you the Cecil Brown that used to be a cop here in town? I went, yep. She goes, hang on, I'll get a phone in there for you. And they put a phone in there, and I talked to my sister. Shelley was doing well, but she was still depressed. She tried to tell me how she was feeling when she tried to take her own life, but she was having trouble expressing it over the phone. A therapist that she was working with had her write out what she was feeling when she attempted to take her life. And she sent that to me. And as I read it, it scared me to death. And I thought if I ever had felt that way, I'd want to take my life. It helped me to understand what she was going through to the smallest of degrees. She was trying to escape the taunting of Satan and his demons, telling her that she wasn't good enough and that she was nothing and that she ought to kill herself because that's all she was worth. And it was so dark, she could see no light. And that's when she took the pills. Shelley was prescribed medication to help with her depression. She saw a counselor to help her through the feelings that she was going through. And they gave her tools to help her cope with those suicidal feelings and the depression. Today she is doing very well. I love you, Shelley. I want to thank you for allowing me to use your story. No one gets through life without scars. If you've ever been hurt or suffer from many of the different forms of emotional and mental health issues, it is important to get help and to hold on to God's promises. God said, I will never leave you. I will never abandon you. He is in your tomorrow already. He is in the afternoon before you even get there. He is there with you in the midst of whatever you're going through. And He will never leave you. He will never stop loving you just because you have these feelings. And He knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that that is something physical happening in your brain. And He wants to help you through it. He will never abandon you. Give God a round of applause. Whatever you face, hurt, depression, anxiety, God will never leave you or abandon you. When you are in the midst of suffering, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual, when you are broken and there is no laughter, you may wonder, how deep will the wound go? How long will I have to endure such pain? How broken will I become? How scarred will I remain when this is over? Will I be able to make it through this? Well, God has a promise. He has a promise for us when our way is dark and our suffering is great. When we do not understand what is happening to us and our lives are in chaos. The unfailing promise of a faithful God is this: my grace is enough for you. For when you are weak, my power is made perfect in you. We don't Well, these words are the words of Jesus. And he spoke them to Paul when he begged for him to take what Paul called a thorn in his flesh away. We don't know what that thorn was, but it was painful enough that Paul referred to it as a messenger from Satan. Sounds like what my sister wrote, doesn't it? Maybe Paul himself suffered from depression. We don't know. We don't know. And it caused Paul so much torment that he begged God not once, not twice, but 3 times. He begged God on his knees to take this from him. And God didn't. And God said, "My grace is enough for you, Paul. When you're weak, lean on me. My power is made perfect in your weakness." And that is the message for us today. No matter what you're going through, no matter what is happening in your life, guess what? God's grace, His strength is enough for you. And when you feel weak and you cannot do it, lean on the power of God, because His power is made perfect in your weakness. Maybe you've been there, or maybe you're there now. And that place where it feels as if there is a thorn just stuck in your flesh and you can't get away. Like Satan is attacking you. You are so tormented in body and spirit that you don't know if you can bear anymore. Listen. God promises never to leave you and never to abandon you. And God promises that He is right there to give you strength in your weakness. Now, I'm not saying that that's all there is to it. But God has provided ways for us to get help. Again, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And folks, it's time that we become aware that suicide is a big problem. 1 in 5 people face mental health issues in the United States. It is nothing to be ashamed about. 22 veterans every day commit suicide. 2 weeks from today, Lisa and I will be spending time with people who've lost their sons and daughters in the military, in war, and through suicide. Pray for them. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for Americans ages 15 to 24. Second leading cause of death. Let me tell you something. Suicide prevention is everyone's business. It's just not the pastors. It's not the psychiatrists. It's not the doctors. It is your business. It is my business. It is everyone's business. And we need to pay attention to the warning signs. Take a look. Let me give you some of them. A sense of hopelessness, isolation or feeling alone, aggressiveness and irritability, feeling like a burden, drastic changes in mood or behavior, frequent talking about death, self-harm, cutting, engaging in risky behaviors, making funeral arrangements, giving away things, substance abuse, making suicide threats, and negative view of self. These are just a few of the signs that someone is thinking about committing suicide. And it is our responsibility to pick up on these signs and give these people an ear. Let them talk to us. Give them someone that is willing to listen and not judge, but to be there for them and to talk with them. There are many resources for people with depression, anxiety, and or suicidal thoughts. And if you are experiencing depression or mental health issues, I challenge you, seek help today. With therapy and medication and God's help, you will find a life that is worth living again. If you're having these feelings, seek out a friend. Tell them what you're going through. Or you can join an online chat group and talk to people who have gone through the same exact things that you are feeling at that time. And if you're having thoughts of suicide and you feel in danger of harming yourself, see a doctor or a therapist. And if you're feeling like you're going to harm yourself right now, hey, call the suicide hotline. They will get you help. And if it's really bad, you can dial 911 and they will send you help immediately. Folks, there is nothing to be ashamed about if you have a mental health issue. Nothing at all. We all have scars. We've all felt sad. We've all been hurt. And just remember, depression, anxiety, having suicidal thoughts is something physical happening within your brain. And God gave us doctors to help with that. He gave us therapists to walk us through it. I challenge you today. Take the time. Get help. Talk to me. If it's over my head, I'll find help for you. Talk to a friend, a loved one, your wife, your husband, your mom or dad. But get help. Allow God to help you also. Just bow your heads, close your eyes, and talk to God.